In 1993, Mike Racy left private law practice to work for the NCAA. After 3 years, he was promoted to Assistant Chief of Staff for Division II and later the Vice President for Division II. He worked for the NCAA until 2013 and since 2016 has been Commissioner of the MIAA. Recently, Racy has proposed the idea of looking at the structure of the Division II playoffs. Join us as Mike Racy goes inside D2 football. All right, Mike, I want to start today with a tweet that you tweeted on Super Bowl Sunday. And you said that too many decisions about NCAA Division II championships involve, quote, "this is the easiest way to bracket," unquote. Another quote was, "we can't compare regions." And another quote was, "this is how we have always done it, and this is what we budgeted." Your hashtags were time to change, need to improve, be innovative, and that the Division II student athletes deserve better. You know, piggybacking on that, over the last few months, you've spoken openly about the process and the idea of forming a task force to recommend a new selection process, maybe even a new structure for the Division II football playoffs. What motivated you? Why do you think the way you do? And how do you envision maybe a different way to establish the field of 28 compared to what we do now?
Well, thanks first for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity to get on and talk about something we're all passionate about, and that's Division II football. And, I'm not somebody that necessarily thinks that we're in a crisis, but I think we all can agree that we appreciate Division II football. And when you start to take a look at the last decade or so of national championship games and games not truly being competitive, and certainly having Division II football as one of our main sports, where we have a national television audience and a big platform to help brand Division II. I just think we can do better. You mentioned the tweet I sent out yesterday. After 24 hours, there are a lot of tweets that I'd like to take back, but that's not one of them. I think even after 24 hours, I still feel strongly about the things I said. And, just full disclosure, that tweet was a reaction that I had to what someone had shared with me regarding a post I made about the recent MIAA ratings for women's basketball. Right. That has, I think, 6 MIAA schools in the top 18 in the country in the MIAA ratings, the power ratings. And, whether or not you put a lot of stock in that rating system or other rating systems, I think we can all agree that there's a lot of really good basketball teams in the MIAA and in the Northern Sun Conference and a few in the Great American Conference, and they're not all going to make the postseason this year, and that's a shame. And my tweet, about the ratings, and then someone wrote back that we need 12 spots in the playoffs this year for the 3 conferences I just mentioned in our region, and that's what caused me to say, that it's time that some of the excuses that we've had in Division II regarding regional bracketing and selections, that that's the way we've always done it, or right, that's the easiest way to do it, or our administrators don't have time to watch all the games and do some sort of comparative in strength of regions, or we just don't have the money for it. Those are excuses. And it's time that we start doing things creatively, innovatively, and as I mentioned at the end of that tweet, our student athletes deserve it. And I felt that way during the football season. Right. Even before selections, just seeing the strength of our region and the way things were stacking up with the strength in the GLIAC and the strength in the MIAA and the battle that was taking place in the Great American Conference, that there just aren't enough spots in the playoffs for deserving teams and deserving student athletes to have that kind of NCAA experience. And that's what really led me to over Christmas break, have some conversations with Chris Dunbar, the commissioner of the GLIAC, and say, it's time that we put some people in a room and start to talk about ways that we can do things better. And Chris agreed, and we worked on this white paper in creating a football alliance or a football task force. And it's got a lot of positive responses. And I'm looking forward here in the next probably 30 days where we'll get our first meeting organized and get some people in a room that care a lot about Division II football and want to talk about how we can improve it.
Well, I knew that tweet was about women's basketball, but I knew it was just as applicable to your thoughts on football and things that you had said about football. Specifically, though, what are the biggest flaws in the way football is set up right now?
Well, I would say that the first thing that I would change is to provide our football committee, and I would say this holds true in other sports as well, with some sort of a national ranking ratings tool that they could use to make comparisons on strength of conferences and strength of regions. And I think it would take an investment by the NCAA Division II Championships Committee to, put together the right resources to develop such a tool. But I think it's worth it. I think it's something that our football committee needs. I think there's something that we're doing with basketball that provides that type of an index or a ratings tool that our committees can use. But that would be the first thing I change in football. I'd also, and I think it's going to happen anyway with the addition of Conference Carolinas, but I would reorganize the regions. The regions may make some sense geographically, but I also think that regional alignments need to take into consideration historical strength. It wouldn't make sense to anybody if this was how things were done in Division I, where the Big 12, the Big 10, and the Southeastern Conference would all be in the same region, just because that's what makes sense geographically. I get regionalization and the geographics as it relates to trying to provide incentive for people to play contests and games near campus and not travel as far and not spend as much money. But at some point, that's on the conferences and that's on the schools. And the NCAA shouldn't necessarily continue to arbitrarily have a system that forces people to play in a geographic area. It made a lot of sense when the division in football was, 110 teams spread from coast to coast. Now we're 160 teams,
right,
and it's really from the Rocky Mountains,
right,
to the East Coast. So,
right.
Some of the incentives that we have for playing a geographic schedule by the way that we select teams to championships probably aren't as important as they were a decade ago or 15 years ago. I would also I would have a rule, a bylaw, a provision, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to, one of the first agenda items for our new task force or alliance is, do we want to get some conferences together to sponsor this, that you can't play a conference opponent in the first round of the playoffs. And
right.
Boy, that makes sense to me. And not just football, but basketball, volleyball, softball, where we have 48 or 64 team brackets. Let's have a rule that you can't play a conference team in the first round of the playoffs, and that if that requires that someone get moved to a neighboring region, so be it. We talk a lot about the prioritizing the experience of our student athletes. Well, it's time that we start putting that into action. I can't think of a worst NCAA postseason experience for a student athlete than a student athlete from Missouri Southern and Pitt State traveling to Minnesota Mankato to play each other in the first round of an NCAA championship. That doesn't make any sense to me. I would also, for football, I would look at what Division One I was about to say 1AA. That's how old I am, but what FCS does, and that's after the teams are selected to actually have a seeding of your top 8 teams. And I would select our teams geographically, an equal number per region, but I would seed the top 8, and you might have 3 out of the same region in the top 8, or 4 in the same region that are in the top 8, and you only keep 2 of those in that region. The other 2 need to go to different regions. I think you're going to have a better bracket, a better championship experience, and a greater likelihood that the semifinals and the championship games where we have a national audience are going to be meaningful, close, competitive football games if you do something like that.
Mike, as along the lines of where you're going with that and the type of change you're talking about, in an effort to kind of make things more palatable to the entire kind of D2 membership, with change in mind, what are your thoughts about having auto bids for what would then be 15, 16 conference champions in this field of 28? What are your thoughts about that?
I would do that tomorrow if we also expand the playoffs to 32 teams, 4 additional teams, 1 in each region. And to me, the regions don't make any sense. 1, 2, 3, 4. I would label the regions Northeast, Southeast, North Central, South Central, wherever the conferences need to shake out. But that's Division II football right now. We don't have West. A West region, it's Northeast, Southeast, North Central, South Central. But I would expand the bracket by 4 schools, get to 32, no first round buys, and I think your suggestion makes sense that every football conference would be guaranteed 1 team in the playoffs.
Right.
And I would say that a lot of conferences, that would be their playoff participant. But I think if you expand the bracket to 32, that makes all the sense in the world to me.
We thought we might spring a system on you that you might not be familiar with, but you mentioned it before we could ask about it. But Matt had created a system using the FCS model where teams were picked were picked and seeded basically 1 through 8, and then he kind of plugged people in geographically, which is a lot of the way, very similar to the way the FCS does it. In this instance, I believe we only added 1 more flight than existed in reality in his imaginary scenario. There were also no repeat games, as you mentioned, which there were, I guess Matt said there were 5. In the first round of this year's playoffs. Obviously not the most entertaining situation that we have experienced, but why is there hesitancy, do you think, to move to that kind of model, or is there hesitancy to move to that model?
Well, I think there probably is some hesitancy in just leadership within the division feeling like we're kind of stuck with the budget that we have in place. And I would argue that it's time that we kind of reevaluate everything that we're doing in the division and where we're putting our resources. One of the things I noted in the white paper that I wrote with Commissioner Dunbar, it was the fact that less than 60% of all of the resources that come to Division II from March Madness and the CBS agreement are divisional allocation. Less than 60% of that is being used on championships.
Right.
And that's everything in championships. hotels, flights, per diem, all of the expenses that go in. So we're spending less than 2/3 of what we get to somehow benefit our student athletes on what is the most important thing that our student athletes are looking for from the NCAA, and that's a national championship experience. So, you're going to get pushback on, well, we can't expand the playoff bracket to 32 because we don't have any money, right, or we can't, do what we're talking about and seeding the top 8 schools after selections and making sure that those top 8 are in different regions to the extent possible, and right, we're not matching up conference teams in the first round. We can't do that because it costs a lot of money. And right, my answer to that is we need to spend more money. We need to take a look at where we spend our money in Division II, and how do we make changes to put more of those resources to the most important thing for our student athletes, and that's championships.
Right. In your opinion, then, are the funds that are currently not allotted to championships being used wisely, or is this a matter of having to get more money from the NCAA for Division II?
No argument that the funds are being used wisely and they're not being wasted. They're all tied to the division strategic plan, and they're all being used on programming and professional development. Heck, okay, I get over 6-figure support from the NCAA to run my conference office. And my point is that a lot of those things need to return to expectations at the conference level and at the campus level, and more of the national resources towards championships. When we started the Division II Enhancement Fund, and it's continued to grow, and that's the money that goes primarily to the conference offices. Most Division II conference offices had part-time commissioners and were being run out of the basement of someone's house. And the decision.
Your conference used to be that way itself.
Absolutely, yeah, most of them were, and so the decision was made nationally, rightfully so, that we need to provide conferences resources so they can become more professional and provide more services, do more things for its members, and that's existed for 20 years. And, okay, at some point, it becomes my responsibility as commissioner to evaluate and prioritize resources I have in the conference office. And that same thing should be happening at the national level. All of these great ideas, all of these great programs, all of these great professional development opportunities, is it time that we push more of those to the local level and use more of those national resources on championships? At the end of the day, if $100,000 or $150,000 disappears out of my budget because that money now has to stay for expanding the football bracket, I'll sign up to that. And I have to go out. My job now as commissioner is to go replace those resources. I have to find new sponsors, or I have to have conversations with my members about increasing their dues.
Right.
Those are my responsibilities. And the money that is used in a lot of strategic areas for the division that's done a lot of great things historically. I think it's time that we put more of that towards our national championships.
Mike, for a moment, I'd like to circle back to something you said in regards to that more of the FCS type setup. We kind of had drawn something up in the overall spirit, really, Mike, of taking, like, for example, if you gave a really hard critical look at who should have been probably the top 4 teams in the nation without any regard to where they were at, we were landing on Grand Valley, Ferris, Pitt State, and who was our other guy? Oh, Angelo State in that mix is who we kind of had. And what we did is we took, for example, if we were to move, and we ended up having in yellow 2 flights in that first round. I think we would likely have trended towards 4 flights in the second, which was identical, I believe, to what happened this year in the actual tournament. And I'm not sure if you're able to see that clearly or not, Mike. But what we were looking at is trying to find games that are still appropriate travel, not flights, and at the same time going ahead and having, rewarding teams who we thought frankly had a better season and so forth, while still trying to stay geographically relevant. So my question for you is, right now in this kind of setup, you wouldn't see, for example, the Grand Valley play Ferris State until the championship, because of the way we had seen it. Meaning Ferris, we had as probably the second best overall team with their only loss to Grand Valley during the regular season. Is this kind of the spirit in the direction you guys are thinking of, or what are your overall thoughts when you start to see some of this on paper?
Yeah, I think I could see it fairly well, and it looks exactly like what I think our members are saying. And what I'm hearing from MIAA fans, that regardless if it is a year where the MIAA has a couple of the best schools, or the GLIAC, or the Lone Star, or the Gulf South, we need to reward those institutions with opportunities that they're going to be playing deep into the playoffs. Right. And the potential that you could meet a conference foe in a national championship game, right, just like we saw in the FCS this year. There's no guarantee that any of those games are competitive, but I think our student athletes deserve that opportunity to go out and prove it. And so I love that. I love what you've got there. I think it, to me, it works and makes sense in other sports than just football. And in some sports, the MIAA might benefit from that in a particular year. Other sports, we might not. But this, to me, is the best way to determine a national champion. It's not the fairest way. We've been stuck in trying to figure out the fairest way to determine a national champion. No, we should be zeroed in on the best way to determine a national champion, and I think this is a better model than what we're currently doing.
Okay.
When I was at the championship game this year, and this happens a lot, but the two teams involved are so caught up in the game that they're thinking very small picture. They're thinking about the win and the loss of that day. Any national media, people who are unattached, so on and so forth, talked to me this year and said, we have to do a better job in the championship. It's not good. We can't grow Division II this way. This is not good for Division II. Do you think everybody has the same definition of what it means to be best for Division II?
No, I don't. I would say that probably the conferences in I guess, what is it, Region 1 or the East region, are pretty happy the way things are set up. But I would just say that we've worked hard for 2 decades to really help create a brand for Division II, one that is built on this idea of excellence in the classroom, on the field, in the community. We've been able to grow the division, but there are so many institutions in Division II that make significant investment in the sport of football. Whether we're talking facilities, whether we're talking scholarship level, whether we're talking investment in salaries, coaches' salaries, and at the end of the day, those are decisions that mean a lot as it relates to where a school or even a conference wants to compete. Those drive membership decisions. And I think unless we get better, the division's at risk to continue to see schools wonder what else is out there. Where could we go? Where could we compete and perhaps provide our student athletes a better championship experience? So, I said earlier, I don't think we're in a crisis yet, but I want to avoid that. As someone that's I've worked most of my professional career in intercollegiate athletics at the Division II level.
Right.
I love this division. I want it to be successful. I want all of the schools that are currently in Division II to remain in Division II. I want Division II to continue to get bigger and grow. But I think we've got to do things that allow sports like football to be treated a little different. We get hung up on, well, if we do this for football, we're going to have to do the same model in women's lacrosse. No,
Right.
we don't. Or men's lacrosse. No, we don't. Football's different. Football drives membership. Football drives decisions on campus on what conference you're in. Who you play. So there are just so many things about football that really, I think, require us as a division to take a step back and look at it and say, what's best for football? What is the best model that allows Division II football to continue to prosper? And when we have these elevated national platforms to tell our story, we're putting on a great show.
Mike, you had mentioned on your task force conference commissioners being on it, for example. What are your thoughts about coaches being on it, possibly?
Yeah, I talked to Mel Churchman about that, and he works with the Division II Coaches Connection Group, and I mentioned to Mel that one of the lessons that I've learned in my 20 plus years in leadership positions, the more people you put around the table, the more difficult it is sometimes to reach consensus and to move ideas and recommendations forward. So, the vision for this alliance or task force is really to be that unique place in the NCAA where presidents, commissioners, and athletic directors that care about football are able to get around a table and talk. There's no other committee or group like that in the Division II structure. Division I has that. I think Division III has a president's advisory group that puts commissioners and others around the table. We don't do that. We don't have that. This alliance allows us to do that for the sport of football. And so what I've told Mel is we'd like to work it out where maybe at each of our alliance meetings or task force meetings that Mel is sitting there as kind of the voice and ears of the coaches, that ideas that are coming from Coaches Connection, like what happened last year where, the MIAA, based on Coach Connection recommendations, decided, let's change the red shirt rule, or let's fix the things that people have concerns about regarding the spring scrimmage. That didn't come from the governance structure. That didn't happen at the management council. It didn't happen at the president's council. It took a conference or two to get together and say, let's make changes. And that's what this alliance is going to do. So it'll take ideas from coaches, Matt, through Mel being a part of this group and being able to say, here's what the coaches think, here's what the coaches want, and things that the alliance are talking about. He'll be able to take those back to Coaches Connection and say, what do we think? So there will be that communication. We're just not going to have a bigger group around the table, though.
Mike, we've kind of talked a little bit about, the regionalization, obviously, with football having the 4 regions. And what we're talking about with an FCS structure is really moving away from the kind of that strict regionalization that would allow us to have 2 teams from a conference not having to play each other in the quarterfinals, for example. How married do you feel D2 is to the regional structure? Or do you think that we can really break apart from it? Because it does seem to be kind of a handcuff.
Yeah, I think the challenge would be to do a complete break from regionalization. I think there are many that would argue that regionalization is part of the division's identity, and the fact that that you schedule local, that you try to manage your finances, it's part of what makes Division II attractive to a lot of presidents and boards. So we wouldn't want to go away from that. But I think what you're describing or talking about is can be accomplished in thinking about it in two different ways. Regionalization can still be an important part of our identity and how we select teams for the playoffs, but how we bracket, how we organize those teams that have been selected, what those matchups look like, can be done with a different model, whether it's the FCS model or the way that Division III does it. So I think there's a way to have both. I think we can find compromise by continuing to use regionalization or some form of it to evaluate teams and make selections who should be part of a national championship. But when it comes time to decide who plays who, what does that bracket look like, and how do we best determine the most deserving team to get to a championship game, to win a championship, at least on paper, what does that look like? There's a better way to do it.
Mike, with that said, do you see it more preferable to basically say, hey, we want to choose the best 32 teams in the country? Or are we saying the best 8 teams from each super region, which is two completely different things? What are your thoughts?
So maybe, again, I don't think we're going to get away from regionalization as a part of the way we're organized. I would love if we had a model and a system that allowed us to, in every sport, say these are the 32 best or the 48 best or the 64 best, and tip it up and see how it plays out. I don't think we're there yet. So, I think there still needs to be some sort of regional structure in how we decide. But maybe with 32 teams, and every conference having an AQ, maybe there's a way to do eight teams that are part of your regional bracket, and then 8 at-large schools that could come from any region, based on where they fall in the national index or a national rating tool, whatever that might be. So maybe there's a way to continue to do this, to have conferences organized by region, a few AQs, a few automatic regional placements, but saving some schools that would be selected through some sort of an at-large process, right. Similar to what Division III does in many of their team sports.
Mike, I'm curious, how would you respond to the criticism that this system is, quote unquote, best for the MIAA, but maybe not best for Division II?
What system's that?
Something that you would introduce, something that you would prefer, being basically implying that you care about this because you're the MIAA commissioner and it would benefit your league, but it would be to the detriment of others. How would you respond to that criticism?
Well, I just don't think people know me very well. I'm a passionate advocate for the MIAA. I believe in the mission and the integrity of the schools that are part of my conference. Mm-hmm. But I also realize that the MIAA, we don't have the best cross country teams in the country, or the right. best golf teams in the country, or the best tennis teams in the country. Some years we don't have the best volleyball teams in the country. Some years we don't have the best men's basketball teams in the country. this past year, we may not have had the best football teams in the country,
Right.
but I'm trying to build a system, or at least one person's opinion, that's trying to create an alliance that can bring some people together smarter than me to try and solve some problems. But, people that know me know how much I dedicated my professional career to the success of Division II nationally.
Right.
I invested a lot in this division's success, and I want to continue to see it succeed even after I'm long gone. And I don't know when that'll be. It could be this June, I guess, when my presidents do my annual evaluation. But I care about this division, and my point is, Brandon and Matt, that we can do better than we're doing right now. We can do better, and there's no there's no fault for anyone wanting to put people around a table to have the discussions that I want to see take place. What do we like about Division II football? What are we doing well? What do we want to protect? What do we want to preserve? And how can we make it better? And at the end of the day, I can't make that change. And the alliance or the task force that I'm putting together can't make that change. All we can do are make recommendations as part of a democratic process to the groups in our structure that have authority to make changes. The football committee, the championships committee, the management council, the president's council, the NCAA staff in Indianapolis. Those are folks that can make changes. And hopefully people that listen to what I have to say know where my heart is, know where I'm coming from, and know that, there might be some good ideas in what Mike Racy is sharing, at least things that we should take a look at.
All right, Mike, very good. That is Mike Racy, the MIAA Commissioner. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for going inside D2 football.
You bet. Good to see you guys.
Thank you.